My name is Ralph Kermit Winterode II. I ran for governor back in the early 90s, and I funded the first movie on the Gulf War syndrome, and I made an enemy of the Department of Defense. I had no idea what I had done. The person that did the video, he was taken out of the United States. He was exported out. He lost his business, lost his wife here. And that's when I first started to see the corruption in Alaska, because the election results, when they were counting the numbers down at the election place in Anchorage, the numbers started going backwards, which is ridiculous. You don't lose numbers. They're supposed to keep going positive. And they had set it up so that they weren't counting the numbers correctly, and they said, oh, well, you can spend $40,000 and we'll recount it. Because I was attempting to get the Patriot Party started, because I'd had enough of the Republicans and the Democrats. And this is my law library here in Wasilla, out on Connect Goose Bay Road. Once a week, I do an internet and a radio show from Alaska on republicbroadcasting.org, and it's 5 to 7 Central Standard Time, or it's 2 to 4 Alaska time. I'm not an attorney, I'm not a counselor at law, but I'm a handful. You could make a movie and make people believe what has happened to our country. The thing that I found out is most people aren't interested. They're all consumed with their own little corner of the world. They have no idea we're all slaves to the system. Let's follow me back here and we'll see where I do my show from. And in this I cover the corruption in the Alaska and in the federal courts. Okay, this is where I provide the legal research. This is the hub of where I have my Mac computer and about 100 gigabytes of documentation. And we have in Alaska 2 cases that are like David against Goliath. David Gladden in Dillingham.
Hello, my name is David Gary Gladden.
The other David against Goliath case is David Haig.
I'm a master guide. I had a plane, they seized the airplane, took away my livelihood, and did it with perjury, destroying evidence, and my own attorneys were involved in it. I got a wife, this is my wife, my 2 daughters down there. They took my guide license away, took my airplane away. That was the only business both my wife and I had, and so it just crushed us at the beginning.
And he was charged for breaking the law on shooting wolves and out of the area, which was totally not true. And so his case, after 10 years, $200,000, his attorneys that sold him out and got in bed with the state of Alaska to make sure he got convicted.
So what is the story behind them even wanting to take away your stuff in the first place?
They gave me a permit to participate in the wolf control program, where you fly around, shoot wolves. And they gave me a permit, told me exactly where they wanted them shot. I went out, did exactly what they said. Then they said that I was shooting them outside of where on the paperwork said we were supposed to be. But then they also said that I wasn't just shooting them outside the area, I was shooting them in my guide area, where I'm a master guide, except the state's own GPS coordinates proved we weren't anywhere near my guide area. And then the evidence that we put in the court record that I was doing what they said, maybe not what was on the papers they gave me, but the people at the official here, the Board of Game meeting, that told me where to go. We documented who told me, what was said. All that was put in the court record, but then it was removed, so my jury never seen it, except they forgot the cover letter. It says, my name's David Haig, and the cover letter says, comes now David Haig, by and through counsel, submits his evidence for his defense, and then there's no evidence. And then all the evidence that's in there is, oh, we found all these wolves killed in your guide area, so you're a rogue guide. This has nothing to do with the wolf control program. Well, the whole thing was I was doing exactly what they had said, and then all of a sudden they say that I'm somebody bad doing it to make money, and that was the furthest thing from the truth there was. The wolves weren't killed in my guide area, and if the truth would have come out in the beginning, the wolf control program would have likely ended. I mean, you understand, so there's a big incentive by the state to cover up what was actually happening. I used to be skinny and have dark hair, and now I'm, it's over 10 years down the road. So it's a pretty serious concern. And we had been given the Anchorage Daily News and the media the evidence, and they're like, holy cow, this is big stuff, but then they would never publish anything, so we started buying advertisement in the Anchorage Daily News, and then they refused to even take the advertisement because they said judges and attorneys had threatened to sue the Anchorage Daily News because they were publishing the evidence, and they said that it was all the true court documents that they were publishing, and so legally they shouldn't be able to be successfully sued, but since they're being sued by the very people that are running the courts, they knew that they would lose. And so we had a big meeting with the president of the Anchorage Daily News, with the lawyers for the Anchorage Daily News, and so it's difficult to get the word out, and so we're doing it this way, with flyers and stuff.
So there's a lot of amazing things going on in America that Americans are not aware of because the media will never show it to you, because they're all owned. They're just an entertainment industry is all they are. They don't have intellectual honesty or critical thinking skills.
Sometimes you tell people this and they get put off because you're throwing allegations at judges and law enforcement and stuff, but our Constitution is what's supposed to protect us from them, and it's not. They've figured out how to get around it, and we're here to show them that they can't, if enough people band together.
I'm in support of David Haig. I heard him speak, I think it was 2 years ago in Soldotna. I heard his case for the first time. I sympathize with him because he is being set up by the different federal agencies on purpose. And I think once the Alaska people realize this, they're not going to tolerate it anymore. And they're going to want justice back in our courts. We've got to get rid of the corporations in Alaska and go back to the American Constitution and the Constitution of Alaska, which was rewritten by the Alaska Independent Party. They took out all the fascist statements, and so if we ever get to vote on a constitution, I think we've got a good one, and it'll make good arguments. So I support David, I support his family, and I'm glad he decided to stand up instead of committing suicide like they hoped he would have done. Because thousands of Americans across this great country are committing suicide rather than fighting, because the media is nowhere to be found. Alaska is the only state or corporation, if you knew the truth about it, that has no sheriff. So the people of Alaska cannot elect their peace officers. We're the only state that cannot do that, nor can we elect Attorney General's office. We can't do that either. So everything is appointed by politicians. And a lot of the state troopers don't even know that. I know a lot of state troopers are really good people. They're born in the state. They like the Constitution. And now they're starting to think about it and going, gee, you're right. I wish I could work for a sheriff where we were elected into office by the people of our boroughs. Because if we don't like what they're doing, we simply fire them.
The police chiefs work usually are appointed by the mayor, so they are beholden to the mayor. The police officers are protected by the police unions, and you will see we don't have an independent investigation. Anytime people are killed, they investigate themselves. It's all done in-house. So what do you think is going to happen when they investigate themselves? They always find probable cause, because I made a move and I thought I was in fear of my life. I reached for my pocket, so they killed me. They thought there was a gun, even though there's no gun there. They're protected by the system.
So Justice Scalia, the U.S. Supreme Court, made a writ in 1997 stating that the U.S. Sheriff of America, of the states, has more authority than the U.S. corporate president. I thought that was interesting because we don't need him to tell us that. The Constitution tells us that. So the sheriff has official office and he has an official bond. So if he has to do anything against the people, we can sue his bond. So you don't see sheriffs trying to cause trouble. The sheriffs support the United States of America Constitution. They don't support the U.S. corporation. So there's a big movement now in the sheriffs all across the lower 48 to help the people out, to stop foreclosures and IRS liens, because the IRS has never proven they have a lien. It's all fictitious. IRS is a private corporation.
And the IRS is so bold they even tell us they're doing it. We are ruled by agencies. And these agencies, this started back in FDR's time, actually started after the Civil War, but FDR is the one that got it going on his New Deal. And these agencies were taking control of the presidential executive power. So he had a research document done by the government in 1937. and they came up with what's called the headless fourth branch of government. So they were trying to control these regulations so they would have the force and effect of law that these agencies, which publish stuff in the Federal Register, that their regulations would have a standard way, and we would know that they have the force and effect of law. The Administrative Procedures Act was passed in 1946. It's codified today, the main part of it, in the 5 United States Code chapters 6 through 9. I have been doing this for years. I have not seen one regulation that has the force and effect of law. They're making regulations. They just make them up. The same as the Senate would put a bill into Congress and never vote on it. The EPA is doing it. The FAA is doing it.
I'm not anti-government, I'm pro-government. I just want the real government to come back. The government of the people. So it's very simple, and I just like to educate people that are kind of on the fence. They don't really realize what's going on, and they watch television their whole lives, and they're not raised by truth, they're raised by fictitious noise 24/7. Trying to unite people on liberty. I said liberty is a great thing. You'll like it, you should try it someday.
When we went to the FBI, Department of Justice, they said that the separation of powers between state and federal, that you have to exhaust your state remedies before you can do that. And this hearing is actually the last state remedy before I can appeal to the federal government. And I'll just give you one example of how corrupt it actually is. A statute from the legislature says courts have no jurisdiction to modify judgments beyond 180 days out from the actual sentence being handed down. And over 5 years later, the state said, hey, we can't sell the airplane because it's owned by a business that we never got a judgment against. We want to sell it because I was flying it. And I said, you can't. There's a statute says that you have to take the business to court and prove the case against the business. It wasn't my plane, it was the business's airplane. And they said, no, we'll just ask the court to modify the judgment to include the business on my judgment. 5 years after the fact, it would be like the judgment against me saying, I don't know, do you own a house or a car?
Yeah.
And I don't know, say your name's Sam or whatever. We'll just add Sam's name to the judgment against Dave and go take your car and house. I mean, how is that fair that they can just modify judgments with other people's names? I mean, you understand, you may get a conviction, but it ain't against you, it's against me.
But you own the business that owns the aircraft.
I know, but when you start a business, it has legal rights.
Yeah.
And what happened with my case is the evidence they used to take the airplane had been falsified to a different area where it wasn't the crime that they said it was. And I was ignorant, hired my attorneys. They all said, oh, there's nothing we could do about it, except my business attorney alerted me that they can't do that. And so by the time they couldn't sell the airplane, the business could have fought and successfully proved that they had lied on the warrants and lied about the whole case. So instead of proving, allowing the business to prove that, they just added the name of the business onto a judgment they got that was obtained when I was ignorant. I mean, you understand in law, I could tell you all kinds of things that may get you in trouble, but, if you get in big trouble, you'll go home and get on, the internet and go, man, I'm going to look about, the law for walking down the street, whether, crossing without a crosswalk is a felony. A cop could tell you it is, and you're like, boy, that don't seem right, but off to jail you'd go, and if you hired an attorney, all of a sudden you see that you're in over your head, but then you would suffer a pretty big punishment, but eventually you would start looking into it. And that's what, that's kind of the problem with what's going on is, in a lot of cases, the attorneys misinform their clients, and then by the time they realize maybe something's going wrong, they've lost their livelihood, they've lost their property, they have to go back to work. My attorneys told me they gave me immunity, so I had to go give a statement, because once they give you immunity, you no longer have the right against self-incrimination. You got to go talk to them. So they're like, hey, Dave, did you shoot wolves outside there? I'm like, yeah. Hey, can you mark on a map where they were? I'm like, here, 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 here. Well, guess what what happened is I was prosecuted anyway. Then I find out in Alaska that if you're given immunity, you can't be prosecuted. And not only did they prosecute me, they put my statement in the charging documents. And then the map I made showed up at trial and was used against me. And the worst thing is it was an aeronautical chart where I put the wolves on. Well, then they drew in pencil the game management unit boundaries and falsified them like 30 or 40 miles. So it appeared the wolves were in my guide area. And before trial, another guy had pointed out that was false, but they used it anyway. I mean, they knowingly used false evidence. My evidence was taken out. There's a cover letter there that proves mine was in there. And, you know, they basically, every right that I would have had for a just outcome was just trampled over. I mean, nearly everything. And it ain't like they just grabbed me physically and threw me in jail and welded. You know, it took a number of people working together to do it, to make it look like I had a trial. But it was, you know, if the jury doesn't hear the facts, you know, if you're gagged and we all say, you know, Joe, you know, Smith or whatever, you know, went up and assaulted my daughter, and you're not allowed to present what actually happened, you're going to be convicted, because there's a dozen of us and there's one of you, and if the jury don't even hear from you, you're convicted. I mean, you understand, is irregardless if you did it or not, it's very, very dangerous to enter the court system. And I now realize that the reason why they went overboard is because of the pro-wolf control program, and you hit upon it. It's a politically sensitive, you know, issue. It ain't like, you know, am I out, you know, digging a ditch in my field where I'm not supposed to dig a ditch. This was something that was in the papers day in and day out, and I got involved in it. But anyway, you know, appreciate your time, and you know, yeah.
Create more havoc down in front of the courthouse.
Yeah.
Than here. They have granted David Haig a chance at full remedy by oral arguments. He's briefed it out into the Court of Appeals, and he should prevail, because, I mean, it's confirmed that his attorneys were in bed with the state of Alaska to make sure he got convicted. What more do you need? I mean, they should have already reversed it so he could sue his attorneys. But the state of Alaska, they never admit error.
Well, David Haig is a perfect example of the government running roughshod over people.
And I've been providing research material to Dave Gladden in Dillingham, a very extremely corrupt little town over there.
My story is about Dillingham, Alaska, and the Gladden homestead I acquired in 1978. I realized in about 2000 that something was amiss with the City of Dillingham's taxing authority.
Since 1977, the City of Dillingham has been collecting property and sales tax with no ordinance to support the codifications that they've been using. There was supposed to be an ordinance, 77-10, and it was adopted for what was in it. They didn't just do a straight repealer and reenactment. And the clerks of court in Dillingham have put in affidavits. Yeah, we don't have the ordinance. But yet, how do you have a code if you have no ordinance? How do you codify, put into code, a document that you can't find?
They've continued sending out tax invoices every year since 1977, and nobody was the wiser, except some of us that were researching through the archives years later and realized that it's been about 37 years of fraud committed here, and apparently no end in sight.
When you start exposing these people, they do not like to be exposed. They're like cockroaches.
And so in 2002 I did a recorded private land claim involving the U.S. patent number. So I did the private land claim, got it recorded, and dropped off the taxing radar scope there at Dillingham. And about a couple of 3 years later, they realized that I wasn't contributing anymore. Of course, there was no need to, because patented land cannot be taxed nor taken for debt.
David Gladden's land is different because he tied it to the land patent where the land from the government was passed over, possession, right of possession, and right of property. And when you tie it to the statute of the United States and that land then is tied to that patent, then he has what's called a perfect legal title, and he recorded it. And the state of Alaska and Dillingham, they have nothing to say about it. Well, one of the things that's going to happen is this is going to end up in federal court.
It took them until about 2008 or 9 to start the foreclosure actions against me to try to you know, grab a hold of my property. And of course I brought to their attention that as part of the public record that it's a private land, recorded private land patent, but of course they weren't interested in hearing about that in their state court of no jurisdiction.
And then with Dave Gladden's case, I got to looking into the state of Alaska, and I found out we have no constitutional courts in Alaska. We have no constitutional officers. There's not one judge or justice in Alaska has ever been appointed to be a judge or justice with a civil commission under the signature of the governor of the state of Alaska. This is shocking. Would you go into a game of Monopoly and not have rules so the other guy could just cheat all the time? When you walk inside of a courtroom, Alaska or federal, we'll talk about Alaska right now, that judge is not bound by any oath of office as a public officer to obey any constitution or any statute. That judge, and we finally, in Dave Gladden's case, got Vanessa White to admit she is only an undersigned jurist. I signed legal documents at the bottom, and I have a law degree. She says, I have no oath of office as a public officer, and I have never been appointed with a civil commission under the signature of the governor. Now that's a scary proposition because when you walk in that courtroom, that judge is bound by nothing. They do not tell us that they have contracts behind the scenes, like in child custody. They are audited, the judge is audited to make money, and there's agreements between the executive and the court system. Totally unconstitutional. So that judge is free to pass out favors, to support his buddies, support businesses, take bribes behind the scenes because they're bound by nothing. There's no rule of law in the Alaska court system. And in the federal, same thing. The federal courts give a better appearance. The Alaska courts are totally out of control. They just do whatever they want. And they think they're invincible because nobody has ever taken them on. David Haig out of Kenai has got documentation of the corruption. And Dave Gladden, the research we've done, we know how they've done it and we can identify it factually. It's no longer a supposition, it's a fact. They changed the names of the courts, they changed the seals, they changed the venue, they changed the jurisdiction, subject, and personal. And nobody knows except those attorneys. Now that's a scary proposition.
So on February 5, 2011, I had an inkling that they were sending out the SWAT team to evict me. And sure enough, right at 11 a.m. when I should be returning from church on Sabbath, why, here's the front yard crawling with members of the Dillingham Police Department and one Alaska State Trooper.
Anytime you get more than one policeman or one trooper together, they try to outdo themselves, and that becomes very, very dangerous.
And so, being the friendly guy that I am, I cranked the window open and asked in a friendly term, "Can I help you, gentlemen?" And the response was, "Hey, you got any guns in there?" And of course, the response was, "Would we be having this conversation if I did?" In which case they demanded that I unlock the door, which I said I would not do, and so they forced entry through the locked door and forced me off my land under force of arms. So I left with my backpack on my back and my Wolverine, mounted Wolverine under my arm. walking down the road, a homeless man in western Alaska in the middle of winter. Middle of Alaska winter. It's amazing that you can purchase a piece of property in the United States of America, in Alaska, and pay for it all off. You hold it fee simple absolute, and you have these so-called officials that can do this sort of magic, black magic I would call it, and evict you from your own land. It just boggles my imagination here in 2014. I thought I was living in the land of the free and the home of the brave, but it doesn't always turn out that way. And then they proceeded to post a notice after that the land or that property was found abandoned and that the city of Dillingham had to take it over, which was untrue. The Gladden homestead became a crime scene.
They sold his property at a sale. They sold his personal property, which they had no reason and no right to sell. They sold his airplane that wasn't even in his name. It was in another name. Nothing stops these people. They just do whatever they want. And then Chandler, the law firm of Boyd, Chandler, and Faulkner, get around and they wrote a letter because Dave Gladden wanted to know how much money they had taken in, because he wanted to see where they were going to spend the money. They refused to itemize the money, which is a statute of Alaska, or to say how much money they put in, and they said only if Dave Gladden would stop his criminal appeal, because they charged him criminally, by the way, also during this, misdemeanor charges, 33 of them, went to the Court of Appeals. They wanted him to withdraw his constitutional appeal and to withdraw his quiet title, to quiet the title and see who really owned the land before they would tell him how much money. We still do not know how much money. We still do not know. There's no accountability yet from Boyd, Chandler, or Faulkner. The city of Dillingham has refused to disclose this to date. So then what they did, Ecock Properties was the firm that bought it, and that's owned by Jerry Ball, main person in that one. And what they did, they passed off a quitclaim deed that is a total worthless piece of paper. It says the city of Dillingham hereby quitclaims any interest, if any, to Ecock Properties. That piece of paper is totally worthless. Now, of course, what's going to happen shortly is Ecock Properties is going to be in litigation also, because there was a Liz Pendens filed prior to the sale, 2 of them, and he had notice. He's buying a pig in the poke. I don't know what they're going to say. What do you do when you get them so cornered with the corruption? And they don't know what to say. When you challenge these people, they do everything in the world. They take your driver's license, they take your property, they take your airplane, they take your commercial license. Dave Gladden has experienced the brunt of it. He has lost his $800,000 or more piece of property, and he's got 3 cases in the Supreme Court of Alaska at this time.
And since it hasn't been handed back to me yet, here we are in 2014, and it's still a crime scene.
One of the things that's going to happen is this is going to end up in federal court. They have blocked David Gladden now from filing any more state cases because they don't want to hear it, because they can't deal with it. Well, when we get to federal court, it's corrupt, but it's not as corrupt as the state courts. At least there's some appearance of justice over there. And we're going to find out. We're not done, not by a long ways yet. We have something in Alaska that's so unbelievable, we don't even have the right of possession, right of property, and possession in Alaska. In the Constitution of the state of Alaska, it says we only have an interest in government-owned land, owned or held. So we are sitting with naked possession. We are mere squatters upon the government's land, and then they put it in the ordinances, and it's in Title 29 statutes. You cannot get an abstract of title in Alaska. They laugh at you at the real estate office, and they know we don't own the land. All we are is sitting on the government's land at their behest, and then they turn around and tax us for the privilege to use their land. And if we don't own land in this country, property, we have no inalienable rights, we're not a constitutional republic, and we're merely slaves to the system. We're not done, not by a long ways yet.